Mental Health Monday.
Mental Health Monday.
This newer generation of therapists that you guys are creating right now.
Social workers and therapists.
Social workers and therapists. All right, so that's funny. When I, what's the difference between a counselor, a social worker, and a therapist? It's a very specific reason I asked this question.
That question comes up all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's used so interchangeably.
Yeah, and it's like, it's annoying to me as a consumer because it's like, I had to educate myself and put the right people around me to learn this stuff. And most people aren't really going to answer those questions in detail. They're usually just going to answer, all right, that's good enough. I'm going to go now before they ask me anything else.
It's funny, and hopefully I'm going to answer that in a way that makes sense and that everybody can grasp. Like, so you got counseling, social work, and a therapist, right? The disciplines are different, right? So we have social work discipline, we have counselors or licensed mental health professionals, right? Licensed professional counselors, LPCs, and then we have marriage and family therapists, right? So these different disciplines, psychologists, right? Clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists.
And each one of these counts as a different form of therapist?
Yes, I'm going to get to that. Okay. So each one is a different form of discipline, right? And it's pretty much how we are educated on how we are taught, right? All those disciplines, though, you can become a practicing therapist.
Okay.
That provides individual psychotherapy or group therapy to individuals or groups.
Are those the foundations for people who usually become therapists? They start there and then they become a therapist with a focus in this?
Yes, typically. But it just depends on the population. Like typically your LMFTs, your licensed marriage and family therapists will do.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, I always had to slow it down. But they typically might do marriage and family therapy. But that's not to say a social worker won't do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's just how those disciplines are how you're taught and how you engage with the person. So for social work, right, we look at person and environment and how the environment also affects the whole person. When we go to therapy and become a therapist or licensed therapist, right, then we can use that based upon our education, our discipline, to help provide therapy, but also look at that whole person and the environment. I'm not to say that every other discipline don't do that.
This is your camera if you ever want to talk shit or like you got something to say.
Okay.
To the population.
Got you. It's not to say y'all don't, other discipline doesn't do that, but for social work, we're taught that way, right? Yeah. Versus maybe a clinical psychologist might be looking at more so, they're looking at symptomology, or different issues, mental illnesses, or things going on. And so maybe their practice, when they start their therapy practice, might be more assessment related and some therapy as well. Yeah. So it's just different disciplines, different ways to be educated and taught, and then your approach on how you get there to be, a therapist or whatever you want to be in that space. Counseling, anybody can do counseling. Right, okay. In a sense.
So an average person can become a counselor without the credentials?
It depends on what the credential discipline is. Like you can be a career counselor, right? But that's not providing therapy.
Yeah. You focus on careers and telling people what would be the best path to that career.
Exactly. Yeah. Pastoral counseling, right? That's not therapy. That's counseling. How
do you become a pastor at a church?
Yeah, becoming a pastor at a church and things like that. So counseling is more of an overall broader spectrum where, certain disciplines, you go into I'm business counseling in a sense, or just, things like that is more broad and specific. And then when you attach some of those disciplines to it, then it turns into the therapy piece or counseling piece or whatever. But sometimes people use therapy and counseling intermediate, and it's just like, hey, guys, it can be separate, it can be the same. But typically, we think about therapy, we are working on your issues, traumas, emotional issues, mood issues, things like that. Counseling might be overall general. Yeah. And seeing how we can guide you to the best place. Therapy gets more specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when someone says they're a therapist, can you be a therapist without a focus, or you should have a focus as a therapist?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. You can be a therapist out of focus. But it just also really depends on. So you asking me these questions, I get super detailed about stuff.
I mean, that's what these cameras are for.
I know.
Because you get to talk, and like I think I was talking to someone about this because they were like, why do you do what you do? Yeah. I actually, let me share a story with you. Funny story. So this young man from Flint, Michigan reached out to me on TikTok for the content that I've been making, right?
Right.
And I sat down and I talked to him, and he was like, I just had a leg surgery, been going through a lot, growing as a person. He's in his late 20s right now, told me about a relationship he got out of, and he was like, he wants to create a similar environment of what I've done for Get Home Safe for him and his homies, but right now I just want to start with him and see if this is something he'd be into, and he wanted to pick my brain. So I was like, I just want to let you know, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm an advocate. So I connect people with therapists. I connect people with folks who do wellness stuff.
Right.
And I share people's stories. But each person I work with, they have an opportunity to share their story. And whether I've worked with you or not, you can reach out to me and we'll see if you're qualified to share your story on the platform, because I have this rule that I don't let you share your story if you're in the middle of whatever's going on and it's something that could be detrimental to how you function in your life right now.
Okay.
Because I would hate for you to tell your story, and you telling your story and your truth is what leads to self-harm for yourself because of that exposure.
Makes sense.
Right?
Makes sense.
And those are things that I got to keep in mind. And most people would be like, oh, so that's specifically with folks with SI. And it's like, no, that's actually for everybody across the board. Yeah. You don't know until you've had the talk and you had to ask questions. And then you kind of get a really good feel for who's what, depending on the situation, right? And he was like, how have you learned so many things? Because you sound like you have a wealth of experience, and I don't think I have a wealth of experience, but compared to an ordinary person, I've done more in this circle of things.